name is Jessica Hobart, and today I will be presenting the activities from the Practical Critical Thinking Skills book from 3.7. So starting with the first problem of finishing the picture, I went ahead and started from looking at the angles of the picture, of all the angles of the picture, and I started to notice that the tip kind of looked like a beak. So I added an eye, and then from there I said, well, what has beaks? So I started drawing like puffy clouds, or it looks like a puffy cloud. And I made a bird with wings. Something very simple, but it just came to mind when I was making it, and I thought that this idea was just something that popped in my head, and it just made that spark happen. I'm not the best artist or drawer, but I just came up with this. So the second problem, and moving on to the second one in the workbook, is to create 4 equal pieces from this shape. And basically, the way that I first saw this is that I first looked at dividing it into 3 separate parts because that was doable. So looking at an angle from a perspective that can be done. So I went ahead and I put a line there, and I put a line there, and then I went ahead and said, how can I make this even? So at first I went horizontally and tried to do it. I tried diagonally, it wasn't working. So then I tried making like little tiny boxes or shapes, and it ended up working. I do have a lot of erase marks on my picture. However, I ended up coming up with this. So I made 3 little boxes, and then I just kept adding the lines until eventually I had 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. And this activity actually took me quite a while to do. It really got my thinking going. I was trying to figure out what angle I could do it without trying to really look at an answer or try to visualize. I tried to visualize it in many ways when I was trying to make these lines, but this is the closest that I made it, and how I solved it, and how I have 1, 2, 3, 4. And now I'm going to move on to the third problem with the candle, the box, and the matches. Moving on to the third problem about the candle, trying to get the candle to wax on the box without having to touch the table using the candlesticks. The candle, the box, and the thumbtacks. And so in order to do that, the first thing I did in order to get the box to stay was I used 4 thumbtacks, and I put them into the wall along with 2 more thumbtacks to support on the bottom. And then for the candle to stay, I added 1 candle in the center and then 2 on the side for it to stay. And so there should be a total of 3 supporting thumbtacks under the candle for further support. And then as you can see, the candle is on that has the wax. It falls directly into the box, and it is not dripping. And so that is how I solved the problem. My initial idea was to put the candle at an angle to see if that would work, but it would not stay. So I ended up finishing with putting the thumbtacks on the edge. So as you can see, the wax just comes down directly onto the bottom of the box, and works perfectly. And that's the end of the problem. Moving on to the fourth problem, which was the case study of the lead masks with De Cruz and Vienna, on the mystery of what happened to them and the case questions. So in order to solve this, I read through the files that were provided in the book. And so the first question was, De Cruz and Vienna, were De Cruz and Vienna expected to meet someone? My conclusion for that is possibly true. And the evidence for this is that they agreed to be at a place at 4:30, and it was written in Vienna's notebook. So it could be possible that they were going to meet someone. However, there's not enough evidence besides what is written on the notebook to conclude that. And then the second question is, were De Cruz and Vienna expected to encounter some form of radiation? This is true. They were wearing the lead masks and they were working at the site, so it is more probable that they would be exposed to that. And then the third question, were they conducting an experiment? And that one doesn't have enough evidence or facts to conclude or say or to determine, which leads to the fourth question, were De Cruz and Vienna in a violent fight with someone? That would be false. At the site, there were no signs of violence on the bodies or trauma, so that cannot say that they would be hurt. If they were in a fight with somebody, they would have some signs of trauma, which they did not in the cases. Which leads to the fifth question. Were they murdered during a robbery? That can be possible, but also false. Again, there were no visible injuries, but it can be something possible because it is rumored that they had gone to go get a car, and then they did have money, and then at the scene they no longer had that. So it could have been possible, but not to say for sure. And then did they intentionally kill themselves by ingesting capsules? This is possibly true, as they both died from heart stoppage with no injuries, which is possible. And then the seventh one is, were De Cruz and Vienna expected to meet aliens on the hill? That is not really known. There's only one person that claimed to see a UFO, so that's kind of like a rumor, not a for certain thing, which leads to question 8. Were they killed by aliens? Again, not enough information for that. So the hypothesis for what could have happened to them is that they could have gone and done a job, something could have done wrong, and it is quite possible that they may have ingested those pills that could have been a possible suicide. The evidence for that was that the materials were bought, they did show up to the scene, and then nothing is really concrete after that. And I would like to know what more details leading up to what they did, but other than that, those were the conclusions that I found for that, and that is how I solved that mystery. Thank you so much.